Good morning. It is so good to be together this morning. I have loved these past 2 days, spending some time in the sunlight again. It's really been beautiful outside, and it certainly is beautiful when God's people gather together to worship the Lord and praise His name and to share in the warmth of His love here together. We're so glad that you're here this morning. I'm not sure if I've told you this before, but I'm thinking about writing a book called How to Lose Friends and Influence No One. No, this is not my autobiography. Thank you for asking. It's actually based on a passage from Mark chapter 10. I invite you to be turning there. We learned some good things in this passage if you want to know how to lose your friends and how to get yourself into a bit of trouble. When I write my book, the first chapter is going to have some job advice for you. You might want to jot this down. First thing you do tomorrow morning when you get to work, march into your boss's office. Or better yet, just take your boss and pull him or her aside in a meeting with all of your coworkers standing close enough to listen. And then you say this, you say, "Boss, I want you to do what I tell you." Got that so far? Next step. Aim for the stars. I want to be your right-hand man. I want to be with you at the ribbon cuttings. I want to be with you at the banquets. Put a seat next to you for me at the corporate Christmas party. I'm ready for the promotion. I'm ready to be with you at the top. If that sounds ridiculous, so should Mark 10. Mark chapter 10 invites us into the topsy-turvy world of Christian greatness. The story begins with a big misunderstanding. Verse 32, what Scott just read, sets the stage. Well, they were going on the road, going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking out ahead of them. We almost get this sense that Jesus is on a mission. That's certainly the picture we get here of Jesus walking out ahead of all of those who are following Him. He's determined. He's on a mission. And the disciples noticed this. We see that as Jesus was walking ahead of them, they were amazed. And those who followed Him were afraid. Then Jesus took the 12 aside and again began to tell them what was going to happen to Him. This is actually the third time in Mark's gospel that Jesus will tell them what is about to happen to Him. Here's what He says. "See, we are going now to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes. They will condemn Him to death. Then they will hand Him over to the Gentiles, and they will mock Him and spit upon Him and flog Him and kill Him. And after 3 days He will rise again." Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to Jesus, and they said to Him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." Now, wait a minute. What do you think about that? Talk about some nerve, right? Talk about asking Jesus for the blank check. "Teacher, we want you to do what we tell you to do." Amazingly, Jesus replies, "What do you want me to do for you?" And it's here that I can't help but think about just how mixed up, just how turned around this conversation already is. Because if the roles were reversed, this would make perfect sense. Jesus, the rabbi, the teacher, not to mention the Son of God, has every right to turn to His disciples and say to them, "I want you to do whatever I ask of you." If the roles were reversed, that would make sense. And if the roles were reversed, it would make perfect sense for His disciples to say to Him, "What is it, Lord? What is it that you want me to do for you?" If the roles were reversed, this conversation would sound very different. probably wouldn't even bat an eyelash at what we're hearing here. And yet, it is the disciple who says to the teacher, "Teacher, I want you to do what I say." Surely there must be some misunderstanding. Indeed, there is. So Jesus says, "What is it that you want me to do for you?" And all of a sudden, the misunderstanding comes out. They said to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory." Now, is this really such a bad thing? Can we really blame James and John? Does it really concern us or surprise us that they would be thinking at this moment about their place with Jesus in his glory? Can we really blame them? Surely they must be thinking to themselves, "Jesus, we have followed you so closely. And Jesus, we were listening when you talked about that great banquet feast. We want to be with you there. And Jesus, we've read Isaiah. We've read about that glorious throne room of God. We want to be with you there. And Jesus, we saw it with our own eyes when your glory was revealed. There are 3 people in the whole world who saw you transfigured on the mountain. We were there. You invited us to see your glory. We followed you so closely." Maybe in their minds they're starting to think, "We followed you more closely than anybody else in the world." Perhaps we can start to imagine why they would make such a bold request after what they've done for Jesus, after what Jesus has privileged them to see, and now here's Jesus acting so strangely, walking ahead of the people and talking as if his time has come, and surely they're thinking to themselves, "This is it. This is our chance. This is our chance to be where we belong. If anybody belongs, it's us at his right hand and at his left." And so as they walk with Jesus on the road to Jerusalem, don't miss, they are dreaming of glory, of grandeur. They're dreaming of the day when they get what they deserve, when they get what they expect, when they get what they have earned. And yet all the while, the one who is walking with them is looking ahead to glory as well. But it's a very different picture. "See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes. They'll condemn him to death. They'll hand him to the Gentiles, mock him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him. And after 3 days, he'll rise again." Talk about 2 people who are looking ahead very differently. Talk about a misunderstanding. You see, the trouble is not that James and John want to be with Jesus in his glory. The trouble is that they do not know the way to get there. Because the way that they're acting as if greatness, glory, the seat of highest honor, can be demanded of God. "We want you to do what we ask you." They're acting like my friends and I might have acted in high school when you're walking to the car and somebody calls shotgun and it's theirs. They're acting as if the world runs on dibs, as if glory in heaven and honor in heaven are something that is handed out like favors in God's kingdom. And so they demand it. And they think that they deserve it, and they act as if they're competing for it. And it ends up sounding kind of ridiculous, doesn't it? And Jesus says, that's not the way to glory. Greatness cannot be demanded of God. Oh, James and John, you do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink? Or to be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? Of course, here Jesus is referring to what? He's talking about his death. He's talking about that very thing that he has just predicted on the road moments earlier if James and John had been listening the first time, this cup that he drinks is a reminder of what the prophets said so many years ago. So many times of old, they would talk about the cup of God's wrath being poured out because of the sins of God's people. This is the cup that Jesus chooses for himself. And in his baptism as well, it's an image of his burial. It's a dying kind of image. It's what's going to happen after he has been crucified. His cup, his baptism, they point to his death. And Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking for. Are you able to drink that cup? Are you able to be baptized into that baptism? James and John say, we are able. And you got to admire their enthusiasm, right? You got to admire their loyalty. Yet even in this, they still misunderstand. The trouble is actually not whether or not they're willing to suffer. Yes, at times they are not. When Jesus is arrested in the garden, they flee rather than drink the cup. Later on in their lives, they will stand for Jesus and suffer for Jesus, both of them. They will choose to drink the cup. Yet the trouble is not whether or not they're willing to suffer. The trouble is that even in this, they still do not know the way to glory. Just as greatness cannot be demanded, it's not handed out like favors, so also greatness cannot be earned. It's not given out like wages, as if we deserved it or won it. And so Jesus says to them, the cup that I drink, you will drink. You say that you're able, and you will. And the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. You will indeed suffer for me, but even still, to sit at my right hand or at my left hand is not mine to grant. It is for those for whom it has been prepared. Jesus puts the decision on these matters squarely in the hands of his Father. It's his to choose. But at the same time, he squelches yet again their bold request, because they do not yet know the way to become great in God's kingdom. Still, they do not know the way to glory. What they have demanded, what they insisted that they will do, these things only serve to show us how much they still don't get it. Clearly, there has been a misunderstanding. Unfortunately, James and John are not alone in this misunderstanding. How easy it can be still today to misunderstand the way to glory. How easy it can be today to forget what it means to be great in God's eyes, to be great in God's kingdom. How easy it can be for the church to be confused, just as James and John in this passage are confused about what it looks like to be great in God's eyes. We can search for greatness down many avenues: more money, more numbers, more programs, more things, more notoriety. Those things can be good. Yet Jesus says, don't be confused. It's not the way to glory. We could make a long list. Jesus, we've followed you so closely. Let me count the ways. Jesus says, it's not the way to glory. As people, we can easily get sucked into this same thing that James and John are doing, the comfort of comparing ourselves to others, the competition of comparing ourselves to others. At least I'm better than she is. At least I'm more well off than he is. Just look at fill in the blank. My diploma, my paycheck, my weekly church attendance, the size of my house, the color of my skin, the length of my prayers. But greatness is not in these things. Jesus says that's not the way to glory. We can demand it. We can try to earn it. We can claim that we deserve it. There are many ways to misunderstand. In fact, when the 10 heard what James and John had done, they too misunderstand. Imagine that. They're angry when they hear what 2 of their 12 have done behind their back. They began to be angry with James and John. Why? Is it because what James and John have done is so morally wrong? Maybe. Is it also because maybe they would have done the same thing themselves if James and John hadn't beaten them to the punch? Maybe so. Just one chapter earlier, we find in Mark all 12 of these fellows caught red-handed arguing about this very same thing. Which one of them is the greatest? James and John are not alone in this misunderstanding. They're not the only ones to get caught up in this competitive comparison. Maybe we sometimes stand with them too. Jesus says in society, surely there are others who get caught up in this misunderstanding, biting and clawing for greatness, pushing each other down, trying to climb their way up a ladder to greatness that leads to no such place. You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them, demanding greatness, demanding honor as if it were their birthright. And yet Jesus gathers the 12 in close, and us with them. And he says to them, not so among you. May it never be so among you. You've been searching for the way to greatness, the way to glory. There is a way. Whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. Jesus tells his disciples, there is a way to glory. Be a servant. If you want to be first, be servant of everyone. The language he uses is slave of all. It's really that of all part that gets me the most. Because it reminds me that it means not just serving the people that I enjoy, not just serving the people who can pay me back for my troubles, not just serving influential people, or people who might praise me for it, or people who might take notice of it. Jesus says there is a way to glory, but the way to glory is the path of the lowly servant. Whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. The way to glory is the way of the servant. And as his words land heavy on the 12 who are gathered in front of him, and maybe they land heavily on our hearts today as well, Jesus says, there are no exceptions, but take heart, because I myself will show you the way. Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant. Yet even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. In Jesus, we find the picture of true greatness in God's eyes, and it is found in the one who deserved every seat of honor, the highest place of glory, and yet chose instead to come not to be served, but to serve. And in his willingness to serve, Jesus goes so far as to give his life as a ransom, it says, as a price to be paid, we could say, for many. For the sins of you and me and all those other ones who would follow him down the way to glory. Jesus shows us how to become great by becoming less. And he gives us the example to follow. I wonder today if we might be challenged to embrace this call to greatness through service that Jesus presents to us in his word. Maybe what you need this morning is that rearranging of priorities that James and John receive. Really, all of the 12 receive from Jesus when he says, "Not so among you. We choose a different path." Maybe for us today, it's too easy to get caught up in the competitive comparison game, one with another, one person to another, one congregation to another, that leads to just so much pride and envy and puts us on the wrong path. Maybe for you, like me, the word that really strikes you the most is that word all, servant of all. Reminding you today of the challenge to serve even those who cannot repay or who might not appreciate it or who might not even deserve it. These are the marks of the truly great in God's eyes. Maybe this message this morning is a reminder for you of just how amazing Christ is. That though he deserved all, he served all. And he took that cup and freely drank, became that ransom for us. And in his willingness to give his life, he shows us the way to glory. Maybe for you this morning, it's time for you to get on that way to glory. Maybe it's time to respond to the great gift of Christ's life as a ransom for your sins by being baptized into his name. Or maybe you're just challenged to go from this place and choose the path of the lowly servant. However we may be called today, let's choose greatness in God's eyes while we stand and while we sing.